Welcome, everybody. I'd like to start the City of Urbana's Committee of the Whole meeting. And so I call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, will we have a roll call, please?
Mr.
Here.
Ammons, Mr. Brown,
Here.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes, here.
Mr. Madigan, Ms. Marlin,
Here.
Mr. Roberts,
Here.
Mr. Smythe,
Here.
Mayor Pressing.
Here.
Eric's voting already. Tell me what topic you're interested in,
I
Marty.
vote that I survived all the way to the meeting.
We all survived Thanksgiving, I hope. Yes. Too much.
Except for Mike.
Yes. All right. So anyway, again, welcome, and we're going to now go to the approval of the minutes of our meeting from November 14th. Is there anybody who'd
So
like to make
moved.
a comment? Aaron Ammons makes a motion.
Second.
Yeah, okay.
Carol, no, Diane Marlin seconds it. Did I get that right, Aaron?
Yeah, I think so.
I got you right. Were there any changes or corrections to the minutes? Okay, those in favor of making the approval indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? No. Okay, so the minutes are approved. Will there be any additions to the agenda proposed tonight? Eric Jacobson.
If this is the appropriate time, or maybe it should be later, but I would like to urge that we get begin a formal discussion of sanctuary city status and specifics of that for next week. I think the time is important. It's important to do this promptly.
All right, so we actually have a thought to add an item to the agenda for next week's meeting, and I think that's appropriate. I don't know if it matters really, if it's a discussion.
Well, I'm thinking of a discussion. Okay, here's how I envisage it possibly playing out. I'm envisaging a formal discussion next week, which might result in direction to staff to draft an ordinance, which we could then, consider as quickly as it could be drafted, and hopefully then to finally pass it and put it in place, maybe either by the end of this year or very early next year, but definitely before the inauguration.
Okay, it sounds reasonable. So there's some work to do, and we do need some wording to be drafted. All right. Yes, Mayor. Thank you.
I've gotten a lot of communication about this, and I think it would be good. I've seen the one that was done by San Francisco, but I'd like to get the ones from the other cities, too.
Mm-hmm.
And look at our original one and just see how it needs to be updated. We could start with that.
And Mr. Brown.
And I just add that the immigration forum is having a public input and information session at the Champaign Public Library Wednesday night about what they'd like to see the community, how they'd like to see the community respond. So I think we should definitely have some discussion and see what they want and see what would benefit people the most before we try to draft any language.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll hear more about that soon, I'm sure. Yes, Diane.
I'm just, shouldn't this be on a committee to start with, though, for discussion?
Possibly. I don't know if for discussion, there's no action taken, it's just a discussion. So I don't know if it matters,
No.
if you have a preference.
All right, I'm just curious why we're going this route.
As far as getting something drafted, a resolution or such, that surely ought to come and start at a committee.
So next week is just a discussion?
Just a discussion.
With okay, all right, gotcha.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Is that correct, Eric?
Yeah, so I would imagine that we could have it as a discussion item next week, which would be full council, that perhaps there could be an ordinance draft for us to consider the following meeting, which would be committee, and could then send to the following meeting, which would be council.
So there would be steps. Okay. All right. Well, we'll see how that works out. All right, now is time for public input, and we do have a few people who have sent a yellow card. If you want to address the council, please do fill one out and bring this over to the clerk. We have a note from Bishop King James and Reverend Dr. Evelyn Underwood, who continue to want to remind the council that they have concerns about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer system problems.
Go
And we have one more at the time of the presentation. Eric.
So I'd just like to read into the public record a note that we received from one of my constituents, Brian Dolinar, who is the program director at the Independent Media Center. I won't read the whole thing, but it starts with, I want to express my greatest support for Imbibe Urbana, who in a short time has been able to bring increased collaboration and synergy to downtown Urbana. And then since we're already going to have a presentation from them, I won't go on with the various things that he has listed there, but and you've seen it all in your email, but it's very laudatory, and I wanted to put it in the public record.
Okay, thank you. That's a worthy addition. Other public input at this time? Make sure I see. Okay. Then let's go on to the next item on the agenda, which would be presentations, and lo and behold, the presentation on Imbibe Urbana, and we have with us Kristen Walters and Annie Adams. And identify which is which, please, for the
I
sake
am Kristen
of
Walters.
Kristen. Okay.
I am Annie Adams.
And if I just might,
And Eric.
yeah, I'm not part of the presentation, but I just, the genesis of this is that Kristen and Annie presented to the Public Arts Commission, on which I sit. And one of the greatest things about the Public Arts Commission meetings are so much fun. I almost feel that I'm cheating to take that as an obligation because the presentation are all from really talented and fun people. But there was something additional about this presentation, which is, yes, it really promoted the arts very appropriate way, but it also has serious economic development impact. And so I thought it should also be heard and seen by the full council.
Okay, and so we're happy to have you come and
Thank you.
take it away.
Thanks. So we have a little slideshow for you. This is the map that we do every month. Our event, Urbana First Fridays, it started in September, and it's essentially a showcase of all of the talent that Urbana has. Well, not all, maybe soon all, but a lot of the talent that the town has. So what we're hoping, and what our main goal is making downtown a habit. So as you can see, there's a collection of events. All those little dots on the map are special events that happen that our businesses put on. And we wanted to do the event this way to have a high density of exciting opportunities for going out, seeing the arts, having some food and wine, listening to music. So what's great about this, though, is that we want our businesses to represent who they are on an everyday basis. So we don't want it to seem like so extraordinary that, you know, you would only return to Dancing Dog, the vegan restaurant, if they were having a special. But you got to try their new vegan cookie so that next week when you're craving something sweet, you go. So it's basically a showcase for the rest of the month. What do you want to show your audience? What do you want to show the area that will bring them back later? UBU, yeah. So what's really fun about our model is that it's an occasion for collaboration, creativity, and experimentation. So we really encourage people and businesses to try something new, trying to reach a new audience, have a new goal, and we try to bring in businesses that maybe don't have the function of doing kind of a night out activity, like Personify, the tech company, and First Federal Bank. They don't. They're not really on the main drag, and have the opportunity to invite a lot of people into their space. So they collaborate with other businesses. First Federal is working with Pizza M this month, so they're sponsoring free pizza during the wine tasting so that the public can enjoy. And Personify is sponsoring a kids craft table at our mistletoe market that we put on in the Civic Center this month. So it's a really fun time. And I think in our first one, we had a great collaboration with Habitat for Humanity, collaborated with the library, and they set up in the Urbana at Sipyard, and that was just like a really wonderful synergy between businesses. So we're hoping that this event series allows for the kind of tightening of the business collaboration, and we want everybody to feel very close-knit, like they can help each other and work together a lot. So far, we have about 25 to 30 participating businesses each month, and this means 25 to 30 intersecting audiences. So that makes our Urbana First Fridays audience very large. Right now, we've counted about 500 plus average on the first Friday so far, but we are expecting a lot more this December, so we'll see how it goes. So far, we have over 1,000 responses for our mistletoe market that we have in the Civic Center, so that's far more than we've ever had on Facebook in regards to responses, so we expect to see a lot of people downtown. Very exciting. So now we're really interested in telling you about the future. So we've kind of outlined what goes on, the success that we've had in the past 3-4 months, and what we think we need to keep this event sustainable and growing. Our first big project that we want to do is have a user-friendly website. This one up here is from Oakland's First Fridays event. And what's really great is not only is it a good resource for people who are interested in the event and need more information, but it actually is a good resource for us in helping us manage the event, helping participants, volunteers, and sponsors have a hub that they can come to and connect with us. Also, next big project is broader marketing and advertising reach. We've been really lucky. There's been a lot of buzz about us so far. We've gotten to Smile Politely in the News Gazette and some of the university magazines without really, doing anything but having a great event. But we'd like to have the time and the budget to do some more official advertising, making sure that our marketing material gets out into a broad audience. So what else is important for us is optimizing our momentum. So we have been successful, and that's wonderful. We've noticed, though, that at some places, this is a good problem to have, that we're kind of busting at the seams a bit. So some of the events are very popular, which is amazing. But that kind of means that in order for...
By popular, give some numbers.
So hundreds of people. So Co-op, hundreds of people, Pizza M, hundreds of people, and Bohemia's packed, and there's a lot of people in a lot of places. So what this means for us is making sure that in the future we have enough space and activities for people to move around in, so that people don't come to one activity and think, oh, it's too crowded, I don't want to go to First Fridays, it's too crowded. So making sure that we start utilizing public space like the Boneyard Creek area, utilizing the Civic Center as much as we can, just any public space that's available in the downtown area. So that's one of our big goals. Also, designing a wayfinding system. Once you come into the thousands of guests, we want to try to minimize confusion and optimize people getting to where they want to go as quickly as possible. So that is one of our very important goals. And one thing that we already do, but we'd love to do more of, is spend more time with our partners, our business partners, and helping them kind of figure out the right language for their events, also the right logistics. What does it mean if they have 200 people coming into their business that night? What are the times that they should have their event? How should they market it on Facebook? How should they market it through other ways? So we already do that a little bit, but we'd like to kind of more proactively offer that. And then volunteers, and all of this is to attract new businesses, artists, and residents. So making the downtown area, showing its vibrancy. It's already vibrant. So we're not making anything of it. We're showing the already vibrant, close, supported business system so that hopefully businesses will move into some of the available spaces that we have, and then artists and residents feel like there's an occasion for them to really come out into the community and connect with people and the businesses. So, yeah, thank you. That's our little presentation, and we hope to see you on Friday. There's a lot of events. You guys all have your maps. If anybody doesn't have a map and would like a map, we can get you one later. Are there any questions?
Did you say we print 700 maps?
You printed 700?
Yeah. Well, actually, we printed 800 this time, I think.
Oh.
Yeah.
Even more.
Even more. Yeah.
All right. And also, we do have, I'll take some questions and answers right now, and also we have a member of the public who'd like to speak at this time, too. Eric, do you want to say something more?
Yeah, my question is, how big is the grant that we gave you to make all this happen?
We do not currently have a grant.
Okay.
We just really love Urbana. But we will be all of the all of those future projects that we've just outlined is we want you to know, because we will be, seeking sponsorship from private organizations as well as and public and from city funds. So.
Okay.
Okay, Diane.
Have you thought about the budget you need to do what you want to do?
We have, yeah. So as of right now, what we've budgeted out is $60,000 for the entire year. So for 12 of the First Fridays events. And that goes to supporting the 2 part-time staff, as well as our advertising budget, and then also entertainment costs. So like I said, keeping up with the infrastructure that we need, making sure that we have entertainment and things for people to do in the Civic Center and in the Boneyard area, things like that, as well as just our general marketing materials that we have currently.
And do the current business participants contribute toward the First Friday expenses now?
They do. There's a sponsorship level, so the lowest being $25, and that's just kind of to get your event on the map, and then we promote it as we do. And then if you are more interested in having your logo associated, or if you want your event specifically on the front of the map, as you can see, there's a couple events there, then you pay a higher price.
Well, I would just say I've been to 2 of these, and with a 4-year-old in tow, and they're not just for grown-ups. There are many, many things for children to do. And the last time we had a poet situated in the SIP yard typing on an Olympia typewriter, and he was writing poems, and he wrote one for our grandson about Batman and the wrestling. So it was an interesting poem.
Yeah, it is one of our goals every month is making sure that there are kid-friendly things to do. And like I said, this month in our market, Personify is sponsoring a kids craft table, because we wanted to make sure there was something specifically for kids.
It's for all ages. So
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right. And now I'm going to ask Carolyn Baxley to come up, and would you like to offer some words of support at this time? Okay, come on up.
I'm one of the, earliest businesses that's been participating in the First Fridays. And I have to say, when Annie and Kristen first came to the gallery, it was about 2 weeks before the first one. Which was on September 2nd, I think. And I thought to myself, first of all, I should tell you that, my background is in marketing. I did marketing for 3 decades before I did other things. So I'm looking at these 2 young women. They're enthusiastic. They're, got all kinds of great ideas, and I'm thinking, geez, the time is really short here. It's 2 weeks until this first event. And so I thought, what the heck, it sounds like a great idea, so I bought in at the logo level, and I'll be darned, on September 2nd, here came all these people, you know, into Cinema Gallery. And I tell you, that is not an easy thing to accomplish. To get that many people through a business in a 3-hour period. I just did the 4 to 7. A lot of businesses go later. But I cut mine off at 7 because I'm old, you know. So anyway, for the next one, though, I might stay open till 8. But anyway, they did a fine job. They really convinced me what social media marketing can do. I mean, I have a Facebook page, and I try to promote my shows and whatever in as many ways as I can. But these gals have their finger on the pulse. And the one thing that really impressed me, because of the type of business that I have, is they were able to get 20 and 30 and 40 somethings into my gallery. Most of my customers are age 60 plus. My best customers who keep me alive are age 60 plus. So I really need what these girls can provide. I really need the younger audiences to come into my business, and that's what so far they've been able to accomplish. And everyone, each one has grown. So I anticipate that the December one will probably be the best yet. But I would like to urge you to think about funding them. Now, I know that a lot of what they're doing is theoretically overlapping with the UBA. And, you know, quite frankly, for the last few years, you know, the downtown businesses haven't seen a lot of productivity from the UBA. So you may want to think about splitting that budget. You may want to, you know, reevaluate how things are being allocated. But I would urge you to support these two women to the extent that you can, because they've started this with a shoestring budget, with no support, you know, from the city. And it looks to me like they're going to be able to keep it going and keep, you know, our businesses vital. And that's what it's going to take to keep small businesses in downtown Urbana. So, thumbs up.
Thanks so much, Carolyn, for
Sure.
coming. I appreciate your words. Other thoughts? Okay, that was a good presentation. Appreciate it very much. Obviously, the youth are the ones who are going to be the leaders of the future, and we do need to have their enthusiasm and activity to make the city beautiful and great, which I think it is and can be even more so. So thanks for coming and sharing that with us.
Thanks for having us. Seriously, thank you.
Okay.
We have then, I know, one known staff report. That's just the next item on our agenda. Mike Munson, did you want to lead the list?
Yeah, I wanted to give you a little Think Urbana update. I was talking to the mayor this morning and mentioned that the Behringer Commons 4 final plat is coming about basically because of the Think Urbana program. So she asked me to give an update. So I chatted with Ivan Richardson, the owner of Behringer Commons, and he said he's proposing this, as I mentioned, that because of Think Urbana and the property tax abatements it offers to residents who build a new home in Urbana. He's going to build a model zero lot line single family home early this spring and use it to market the other 11 lots that are part of the final plat. And I talked to him about it. Think Urbana help with this? And he said if it wasn't for Think Urbana, I wouldn't be doing this. So to date in 2016, we have 9 single-family homes have been built in Urbana under the program. Also a townhome, a 2-unit townhome, and 23 units at the pending Highland Green development are also going to receive these abatement incentives. 3 new applications for single-family homes, 2 of them in Stone Creek, are in the works. I talked with Carl Hill, the developer of South Ridge subdivision in southeast Urbana, and he told me that Think Urbana has been a lifesaver for his development. They've seen quite a bit of activity. They have 5 new single-family homes and cottages built this year, plus a 2-unit townhome. He mentioned next year he's going to see even more construction. He said there'll be 4 or 5 new 2-unit townhomes that are in the works, plus 5 additional single-family homes and cottages. I asked him, what kind of activity he saw in 2015, the year before Think Urbana began. He said he saw 2 new homes. So that's encouraging. Stone Creek got off to a little bit of a slow start. There were 3 new homes constructed this summer, but I drove through the subdivision a couple of weeks ago. I hadn't been through there in a while, and I saw 3 new sites where homes are going in. So that they're up to about 6. So that's encouraging. Also, 8 commercial businesses have applied for Think Urbana incentives this year, including Burger King, 25 O'Clock Brewery, Planet Fitness, Cherry Tree Cafe, Sherwin-Williams, and Leak & Sons Funeral. So, thanks.
Okay, thanks for that update. Mayor Pressing, you had
Yeah.
also a report.
I would like to talk about adding 5 new police officers. Let's see, we got 5 in here. We have a lot of concern about the shootings and the murders. We've had 4 murders this year. Historically, we've had 0, 1, or 2 at the most. 2 of the 4 were domestic disputes. One of them, a father killed his son, and the other one, a young woman was killed by a former boyfriend who then killed himself. But the other 2 were related to shootings, and that's what's got several neighborhood organizations meeting with each other, which I think is a great idea. SUNA, HUNA, and the Learman neighborhood group. So I think we have a real public concern, and I think we need to amend our budget to add 5 new police officers. And I talked to Chief Connolly this morning, and I asked him how many he needed, and he said 5. And there's documentation in here about that. We could have the 5 officers start training at the Police Training Institute in April, and there's a whole memo from Chief Connolly about that. And we just could talk about the cost and the estimated funding sources. Each new officer would cost about $93,000. So 5 new officers for 3 months of this fiscal year would cost $116,000, and the cost next year would be $463,000. Well, how would we get the money for that? I have a couple of ideas, but certainly open to other ideas. But first of all, we saved $200,000 a year on health insurance. We used $80,000 of that to kind of even things out among the employees so that they would all get significant savings by switching to the new system, because they had to, switch doctors and everything. So we worked with the employee health insurance committee on that. So we have $120,000 annually left over. So this second half of our fiscal year, we would have $60,000 to use for the police officers. We could do a transfer to the police department. I think we're going to need new revenue, and I am proposing raising the hotel motel tax 2%, which would generate $300,000 a year. And I've talked with our finance director, Elizabeth Hannon. If we passed the hotel motel tax in December, we could implement it by March 1st, because it takes a lot of adjustments. We got to notify people and change all the forms and everything. So if we could start it on March 1st, we would generate $100,000 in the last 4 months of this fiscal year. So we would be able to cover the cost for this year. And then if we did it next year, we could come up with about $400,000 of the $463,000. And I think the remainder could come from increased assessed value from new construction. We've had quite a bit of new construction. So I just wanted to put the murders and the shootings in context. I have an email from Chief Connolly which lists the number of murders from 1993 to 2016. So for 23 years, the most we ever had was 2 in a year. 8 years had no murders, 10 years had 1, and 5 years had 2. And as I said, this year we've had 4. The shootings, there have been 102 shootings in this county so far this year. 25 of those were in Urbana. And there were 122 shootings in the county last year, so we're not finished with this year yet. I hope it stops, but who knows what's going to happen. Of the ones last year, 35 were in Urbana, but we only had one murder. So I think the thing that's really got people upset is the shootings, which can result in murders. So I would like to start the discussion on this and see if we can get something put in place so that we can get 5 new officers beginning their training in April. And it takes many months to get an officer trained, and we hope we can get some experienced officers. We've had success doing that. Anybody have any questions?
Are you going to be placing, Mayor, are you going to be placing this as a discussion item on an agenda? Or-
Right. I would like to start talking about it, but I just want to run it by you to see what you need besides this. If you want to explore it.
Okay. And is there thoughts? I first saw Bill Brown and then Charlie.
And this could probably just as well wait to our discussion, but I guess one of my concerns would be, is it the police officers we need? Is it investigators? I don't know if having one extra police officer on the street at the time of these murders would have prevented them. But I know that 2 of them haven't been solved, so if there's something else, some other resources they need, I'd like to hear about that. So I'm just not quite sure, where this is coming from exactly, and if it's coming from what we need, or is it coming from what we think we need, or impressions or something. That's all.
Well, I think our officers are very stressed right now, and I agree with you that just having officers doesn't necessarily prevent something, but there's a lot of work in finding who did it and getting them arrested and into the court system, and that does prevent future problems from that person. So that is prevention. So this is just to start the discussion, because we have held the number of officers constant. I added 5 officers in my first term, 3 one year and 2 the next year, and then we've added 2 not as new positions, but just to fill the gaps, because people go on vacation or they retire, and you got to train a new person, so you don't have anybody on the street. So we're trying to keep the force up to 55, and that's not easy to do. And so we have a lot of demands on people, and I think they're very stressed, and so I think you can't just add 1. That's why I asked the chief, and he has a good discussion about why he wants 5. So I just want to start the discussion.
And then Charlie.
Yeah, basically extending Bill's comment would be how the police department would be restructured. Are we adding another beat, or are we beefing up different sections of the department? So that would be one aspect. And then, of course, the other one would be comparables of our city with the university community to others of similar size and demographics.
Chief Connolly has a memo that's following my overview where he talks about the way they staff, but I'm sure that he'd be available to answer questions.
Okay. And then Eric.
So what I heard Charlie say, and I would share this, is how does our staffing compare with other cities with comparable demographics? And I mean, overall, nationwide, I know I've looked at the numbers, and we are thinly staffed just based on per capita number of police officers compared to the national average. We're at a little bit more than half. But I guess I'd like to see a more detailed analysis of that than I was able to, glean by just a very brief exploration on the web. The other thing that I'd like to see is the issue, just the question of what are the best revenue sources. So, for example, I don't know, I've never done any research on this, but the numbers must be there. How elastic is the price and occupancy ratio in hotels? Will increasing the cost of staying in an Urbana hotel or a motel by 2%, is that going to, will that be sort of negligible with respect to occupancy? There must be data out there on how those on how those things go. So you asked for if we had any questions or if there's more information. So I think those are the two things that that I would have in mind is the is comparables to other cities and elasticity of hotel occupancy with modest increases in cost.
Well, I can see that we're getting good topics for further investigation when we have a deeper discussion on this topic. Anybody
I
else?
would like to
Yes,
point
Mayor.
out that we do have a lot of cooperation between the police departments in this county, but the fact that we have officers that really are being pushed to the limit year after year, I think is a good indication that we do need to expand the staff. And we went through the discussion about the hotel motel tax, and we've done some research on another topic. So we've met with council members individually on that one, and it seems that there are a lot of hidden costs that are sometimes put on by the hotel itself, and the customers really look at the room rate, and the other things don't really matter that much because it's mostly based on location and the room rate. But I don't know if there's studies on the elasticity, but we haven't found that in this market that there seems to be disincentive for people depending on the add-ons that are put on by the hotel.
Okay, well, oh yes, Michael Madigan.
There you go.
Yes.
Thought I got a promotion there for a minute. The first thing I would say is I would have a concern about relying on savings from health insurance. I mean, I realize that that's there, but that industry is in quite a bit of flux and probably will be in more flux in the next few years. So that is a little bit of a concern of mine about relying on that as an ongoing savings. And then my second point would be I'm interested in what Eric is talking about in terms of how people book rooms, and I would absolutely agree that I booked a room based on what Travelocity tells me it's going to cost, and then I'm shocked when I have to pay the bill. Not really, but I mean, it's always quite a bit higher because of all the fees that are added on. But I'm not so sure that conference bookers look at it the same way. And that's a large percentage of our buyers of blocks of rooms. And I'm sure they're looking at the all-in cost because they have a budget. And we're competing with other cities. So that would just be another thing to take into consideration here on the increase in the tax. Are we going to remain competitive with Bloomington or Peoria or Springfield?
Great. Good comments, all. All right. I think that, are there other staff reports at this time? Okay. Seeing none. We'll go into the body of the agenda right now with the ordinances. First, we have ordinance number 2016-11-110, an ordinance approving a power purchase agreement with WCP Solar Services, LLC. And Scott Tess, our sustainability manager.
Good evening. Before you today is an ordinance that would authorize the mayor to execute a solar power purchase agreement. The legal division recommended bringing this forward as an ordinance because it would convey an interest in real property. We're not selling any property, but we would be dedicating a portion of city property for solar array. So as a part of the Illinois Grow Solar Technical Assistance, the city was able to get some support bidding out, competitively bidding for a solar installation. And since there's no funding dedicated for solar installations, we've pursued this as a power purchase agreement. What that means is instead of purchasing a solar array as a piece of equipment and asset and paying the full price up front, through a power purchase agreement, we pay nothing up front and instead pay the installer a per kilowatt hour fee for a term. And so for every kilowatt hour that the solar array generates, that's what we pay. That's how we pay for the installation. So earlier this year, we bid out an opportunity for a solar installation at the Arbor Division's shop that's at the closed landfill. The array that we were looking at would be ground mounted actually on the closed landfill just behind the Arbor shop. So it would power the Arbor shop facilities and would provide almost all the power for the array. Some details about the power purchase agreement that we have. It's a 25-year term. That's a fairly standard term, although there's a lot of variety for power purchase agreements. It supplies nearly all of the electricity for that facility, as I mentioned. The renewable energy credits that would be generated by the array would be retained by the installer for the first 5 years of the term, and the city would receive the ownership and be able to make the environmental claims the following 20 years of that term. We split that as a way to keep the price, the per kilowatt hour price that we would pay the installer below or equal to what we expect that we would otherwise pay for grid electricity throughout the term. But also we had an interest in retaining as much of the environmental claims as we could. So we had to kind of split that between the installer and the city. All installation, maintenance, taxes, and fees would be the obligation of the installer. We only pay for the kilowatt hours that the array produces and pushes into our building. So if something breaks and the array produces less electricity, we simply pay the installer less because we just pay per kilowatt hour. The initial price per kilowatt hour is 5.1 cents. Our current electricity supply is just under 9 cents. So in the first 5 years, when we're not retaining the renewable energy credit ownership, we're saving money by producing solar electricity on our own property. At year 6, when we start to retain ownership in the renewable energy credits, the price is 10.5 cents. That's a big jump. However, that's approximately equal to what we expect the market rate to be for electricity 5 years later. We're using a somewhat conservative 3% annual escalation in market grid price for electricity. Most folks seem to be using a 4% annual escalation, but we're just being a little more conservative in our estimates and using 3%. And with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
So, okay, Bill Brown, please. Go ahead.
So that difference in price when it jumps, is that about what the solar RECs are selling for? Is about 4.5 cents or so?
It depends on what market you're selling into. Our bid didn't ask for disclosure of what market they're selling into, but presumably that's the difference.
Okay. And then what's the life of a PV panel now? Is it about 25 years?
Well, the equipment is typically rated for, the panels are rated, the modules are rated for 25 years, or warranted, I should say, for 25 years. They don't stop working at 25 years. Essentially, as soon as you install them, over time, they become less efficient, they produce less electricity. But 25 years from now, they're still going to be producing electricity, just not as much as they are in year 1.
And then how will the net metering work? Will we have net metering, and will we be reimbursed for above and beyond what we use at that facility? Like, I know for homeowners, they can't be reimbursed more than they use, but since we're a bigger city, we use it other places. I was just wondering how that would work.
It's the same net metering scheme as for residents and other businesses. So if we produce more electricity than we use at any moment, that becomes a bill credit. If in any particular month we produce more than we use, that becomes a bill credit and it rolls over to the next month. However, with Ameren, in a 12-month period, if you produce more than you use, you get zeroed out, you lose that bill credit at the turnover of the 12 months. So you want to size your array so that you don't really produce more than you use in that 12-month period. Now, the Arbor shop is interested, Arbor division is interested in an expansion of that facility. So their electricity demand would go up, and we'd be very comfortably, very substantially under the total demand for that facility. As it is, we're just under the total demand now in terms of design.
We'd have to only apply it against that one facility. We wouldn't be able to transfer it to one of our other facilities. Okay. And do you know what the total power output would be over a year on average?
I think it's approximately 20,000 kilowatt hours a year.
Okay. And how big would the actual panel farm be? Is that what they call it? Panel farm?
My recollection was it was sort of 2 strips of panels. It's probably something like 50 by 50. It's a small site.
Okay. I think that's it
Yeah.
for now. Thanks.
Yeah, I think there's a footprint of it in the memo that you provided. Diane Marlin.
I think it said 48 panels. That's what it is. So this is a new thing for us. If I understand this right, it locks us into buying electricity from these solar panels for 25 years. So what if, I don't know, what if something happened and suddenly there wasn't a shop out at the landfill 15 years from now? Do we have the option of moving the panels and supplying electricity to somewhere else?
There is a provision in the agreement to move the panels. I think that would be at our cost, but we could continue the agreement.
We'd have to continue the agreement, right? Or pay the penalty.
Right. But there is a provision for relocating the panels if need be. I did ask the Arbor Division if they had any intentions of relocating their facilities there, and they said that no, they actually intend to expand that facility.
And do we have to have insurance? What's the extra cost?
For us, we won't pay any insurance costs.
They pay the insurance?
We won't own the system. We won't own any of it. They pay the insurance costs. They own it. They operate it. It's essentially a service agreement. We simply pay them a per kilowatt fee for the kilowatt they deliver to us. At the end of the 25 years, the contract provides for the installer to decommission and remove the equipment. We would also have the opportunity to pay fair market value for the array and purchase it at that time if we want to. If we don't want to, we simply have them remove the equipment.
So why was this site chosen as opposed to something that's more visible in the city?
Good question. A lot of our roofs for our city facilities are going to be needed to be repaired or replaced long before the expected lifespan of a solar installation. What that would mean is if we put a solar array on, say, this roof, and then 5 years from now we have to replace the roof, that means we have to pay essentially twice to install the solar array. Once now, then we have to pay again 5 years later to remove those panels, replace the roof, install them again. If you include that cost in the 25-year lifespan, it's not as good of a financial deal. So we chose this Arbor shop because we can do a ground-mounted system. Doesn't matter what the roof is like. We discuss at Public Works, at least my ambition is to follow as we replace roofs and have roofs that are warranted for 25 years. And we follow that with an evaluation of whether that roof is now a good candidate for solar.
Are these panels similar to the ones that the U of I has in their solar farm? I mean, is that what they're going to look like?
Yeah, essentially. Okay. I don't know what brand they're using. It's likely a different brand perhaps, but it's essentially the same thing.
Okay.
All right. And Charlie.
Most of my questions have been answered, but let me add one more. I see an option for early purchase if we want to buy it ourselves. I don't see anything in here about, say, some big technical breakthrough or whatever that makes solar panels more efficient. What happens then?
Well, there is an opportunity for an early buyout. It would have to be after the first 5 years in order for the installer to take advantage of tax benefits of owning a solar array. They have to own it for 5 years. After that, just like we can negotiate a fair market value buyout at the end of the term, we could also negotiate an earlier buyout at fair market value. In terms of whether, 10 years from now there is technological improvements, most certainly there will be, that make solar even cheaper. That's true in terms of the per unit or marginal value. We might have missed out on some savings, but that would also mean we would have missed out on waiting. Would also mean we would missed out on 10 years of small savings. So.
And
Other
I assume,
questions? Charlie?
final question, sorry. And I assume that we can add to this array working with the company. If
We
need
could,
be.
if so. For instance, if the facility expands and the demand expands, we could, amend the agreement or sign a secondary agreement that would attach a couple more panels.
Other questions? Aaron Naaman.
So, can you break this down for me in just like dollar amounts? What are we spending in the Arbor Division now for power, and how much would this save us?
For the next 5 years, if we did nothing, we would pay, well, for the next 3 years, we have a fixed electricity price for city facilities. The supply portion is fixed, and then the Ameren fees on top of that are, they're adjusted every year. But let's just presume that it's all fixed for the next 3 years. Then doing nothing scenario means we paid about 9 cents per kilowatt hour. If we go with a power purchase agreement, that means in the next 5 years we would pay 5 cents per kilowatt hour. So we're saving money for those years. Then when the price in the power purchase agreement fee schedule jumps up because we start to retain the renewable energy credits, that price is really going to match what is expected to be the market price or the grid price for electricity. So for the next 20 years, presuming that price escalations are smooth and predictable, we're essentially matching the grid price, except so we're not saving money, we're not spending money, but we are shifting a portion of our consumption from the grid, which is a mixture of a very small amount of renewables, nuclear and coal and gas. We're switching from that to solar. It's a very small portion of our overall demand. In a certain sense, we're diversifying our energy sources.
No, I like that. I love that part of it. Just wanted to see in numbers. Basically, 9 cents per kilowatt versus 5 cents per kilowatt.
Mm-hmm.
We do not own it, so all the maintenance and upkeep and all that type of stuff, somebody else comes if something goes wrong. Now,
Correct.
You said that over the 25 years, the panels lose efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
So does that equate to us actually paying more?
Nope, we don't. So in year one, the panels are going to produce about 20,000 kilowatt hours. We're not going to pay the installer for 20,000 kilowatt hours of solar for 25 years. We're only going to pay them what the panels actually produce as they actually produce it. So we're going to pay a power bill just like we always do per month, and we're going to pay, just like to Ameren, we're going to pay exactly for what we receive.
But because we don't own it, we can't, or because we're a city, we can't sell that extra back into the market and get any
Nope.
benefit from that.
If we overproduce, we'll get a credit, and just like rollover minutes for a phone, and we can
Yeah, which
use
I
that
have
credit in another month.
That's another conversation. Because after 12 years or 12 months and you got extra stuff, I don't understand why you would just be wiped clean. If you have rollover, then it rolls over. I don't understand why it ends after a certain time. But that's another conversation. So, all right, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, going around here on the council dais, Mayor Pressing, and then
How would this change our greenhouse gas goals? I mean, much closer would we get?
The impact of this array would be less than 1% of city facilities and operations greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, so we're at 15% right now that we did?
That's
This-
a different measure.
Okay.
That would be for what you're referring to is for our community greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay.
Just
Just the
yeah,
city
just the
part.
city
Okay.
portion. It would be
Okay.
less than 1%. So it's a
Okay.
small impact.
Each percent counts. All you have to do is get 100.
Bill and then Diane.
So it seems like if we assume that they produce 20,000 kilowatt hours per year and just multiply that times the yearly rate, we get a total cost over the 25 years. Couldn't you figure out sort of a effective cost of interest based on whatever that adds up to, based on what the cost would be to just borrow the money and do it instead of do the power purchase agreement?
Yeah, that's probably true. We could take a for instance per kilowatt install cost if we were to pay up front.
Okay, could you do that for us and send it to us this week?
Okay, Diane Marlin.
I just wondered, was there flexibility on when the REC's ownership would transfer to the city? Do we have to take it after 5 years?
The reason for the 5 years is that right now in Illinois, solar renewable energy credit prices are up because the state has been buying solar renewable energy credits through a series of procurements to meet the renewable portfolio standard. And they're buying them in blocks of 5 years. So in our negotiations, we're trying to figure out a way that we could keep the price, a net present value positive, but also retain some of the RECs. And so, we hit on this 5 years as being the most valuable renewable energy credits that we could give up to the installer.
But if we didn't do that, if we just went 10 years, would we get that 5 cents per kilowatt hour for 10 years?
Well, there's an annual price escalation, but essentially, yeah, we would save, if we give up more RECs, we save more money. Because the installer will sell those RECs themselves, and so they get a value out of that.
Did we consider that?
Our initial bid looked at just a deal where the installer would retain all of the renewable energy credits. And it was something to the effect of a price that starts at 5.1 cents and has an annual escalation of a couple % throughout the term. We save more money that way, but we can't make any environmental claims. In fact, the IRS, FTC, Federal Trade Commission, has ruled that that's double counting because renewable energy credits are a tradable commodity. Two people can't own or claim to own the same environmental attributes. So if we want to have the most financially, the biggest cost savings, yeah, we could give up all the renewable energy credits for the entire term, save more money, but we would not be able to say that we are using solar power or renewable energy. That claim would be sold to the installer would retain the claim and would sell it to someone else.
But we are using solar power.
Well, this gets back to the element to the portion of the city purchasing renewable energy credits
But
through
the
municipal
solar
electric
panels are
aggregation.
there, so why can't we say we're using solar power?
Because it's double counting. We've sold that claim.
Thanks, Al Gore.
This never will make sense to me. I mean, so what's the point of putting in solar panels?
Well, I think what the proposal we have hedges this problem. We give up, technically we shouldn't be making a renewable energy claim in the first 5 years according to the power purchase agreement that we have before us. But for the bulk of the installation, we would be able to make a renewable energy claim.
But we have the solar panels for 25 years. This makes
This
is crazy.
It's
It
the
really
notion
is
of
crazy.
splitting the environmental attributes off of the actual fungible kilowatt hour and commodifying them and selling them so that they have value.
So it's a tricky Pete moment. All right,
Just
Mike
one
Madigan.
follow-up, I'll make it quick. So, following up on what Diane is saying, and I totally agree, the reality is we are using the solar power. We just can't make a claim to it, but it's the reality. So, I think it'd be instructive to see from you in addition to the information that Bill has asked for, what would be the total loss of RECs over the time? Well, that's easy. But what would be the total savings if we laid no claim to a REC the entire time and just decided to actually save money, which to me is better than having some piece of paper that says, gee, we use solar power.
Because we know
I'd rather save money.
We are using solar power.
So we can kind of take that consolation prize. We know we used it, but we just can't tell anybody. How's that?
All right. I've got a question. Bill, would you want to take over the chair for a minute?
Sure. Chair recognizes Dennis.
Thank you. So it sounds like this is our test case for the first time that we're using and claiming to use solar power in the city, which of course is one of our goals for sustainability in the community. We're going to try to be leaders, just like some of the people who bought solar panels for their homes, to try to achieve this goal. And then in the future, we might actually choose, if we have successful, if we find that we're saving money or potentially could save money, whether we're selling RECs or not, when more buildings are prepared to install solar panels, maybe on a larger scale, we'll have at least a sense of what the value is for the city, because we'll have now a test case. So, and it's possible, it would seem to me that while we have we have buildings that have a lot of roof space, we also have yard space around some buildings that might be converted sooner or later into solar sites. So,
Sure.
All right. So I guess for a test case, if this isn't costing us a lot, this might be, at least it would fulfill some of our own claims to seek sustainability. That's really the main thing that we're looking at here.
Yeah, and a 25-year, the way this is structured now, on a 25-year net present value, it's still marginally positive.
Yeah,
It's a small
marginally
savings.
positive. It's okay. Okay, thanks. That's it for me.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Diane?
Can you define what you mean by solar
That's fine.
energy claim, just so I make sure what that is?
So kilowatt hours are like dollars in the bank. They're fungible. Once they're pushed into the grid, you can't distinguish which one was coal generated or which one was renewable or solar generated. So the way that a way has been created to create a market and add value or attain value for the renewableness, the renewable attributes, or the environmental claims, kind of euphemistic there, that goes along with renewably generated kilowatt hours. At the point that those wind or solar kilowatt hours are generated, the kilowatts typically get sold as kilowatts to the market, whatever that market price is, and then the environmental attributes are split off and turned into a certificate, so that the generator can also get paid for the renewable attribute of what they're doing. So what we do with municipal electric aggregation is we bid the cheapest price we can for residents, and then we separately go and buy renewable energy credits. This is kind of the inverse. What we're trying to do is keep those renewable energy credits that are generated with the actual generation asset, the solar array.
All right. Eric.
The other thought that I have as we think about ground installations is maybe, and I'll raise this issue on Public Arts Commission, maybe we should think of integrating solar panels with public art. So while we were talking about this, I Googled some images of that, and actually they're really, some of them are really very beautiful. So maybe I'll suggest that you and Pauline talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
Anything else? And is there a suggestion for a motion? Charlie, one.
I'll move to send this to council, but without a recommendation.
Okay. Anybody want to second that?
I'll second it.
Aaron Ammons seconds it. Other discussion? All right. Would the would the clerk please, oh, it's a resolution. All right, those in favor indicate by saying aye. I forgot.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, right. All right, ordinance number 2016-11-111 is next on the agenda. This is an ordinance amending the Urbana City Code, Chapter 20, Articles Roman numeral 4 and 5. Brad Bennett for Public Works.
Thank you. I appreciate being able to talk to you this evening. What you've got in front of you are some proposed amendments to the right-of-way ordinance. We had previously presented 6 areas where we wanted to make revisions to the right-of-way ordinance to better protect Urbana residents from potential utility installation damages. And I'll go through those real quickly. The first was prohibiting the deposition of excavation spoils in the right-of-way. The second one had to do with the notification and signage of who was doing the utility installation. The third item was a one-dig policy, which would require utilities to make notice to the city about what work they were doing, and for the city to try to work with the utilities to coordinate so that multiple utility installations did not occur within a 1-year period at the same location. The fourth item had to do with open excavations adjacent to city parkway trees and requiring the arborist to be noticed if any tree root over 1 inch in diameter was cut. The fifth item had to do with open excavations. We're looking at reducing the period excavation could remain open in the right-of-way from 10 days down to 48 hours. And then the final item had to do with adding a requirement if any excavation in the right-of-way in a paved area, so a sidewalk or a street, remained open over 48 hours, there had to be a temporary surface, which could be a plate or some sort of aggregate compacted into the excavation. So that's what we had initially proposed. Per your direction, we reached out to the various utilities that do work in Urbana. You can see in your council memo all the ones that were listed. We do have quite a bit of fiber optic utilities that we do work with. We did that in the month of October. The comments were due by the end of October. We ended up taking comments all the way up through the early part of November, so we did give them an extension on that. We did meet with the utilities and spoke with them. They did provide some good and valuable input, kind of their perspective on how these proposed items would impact their work. And based on that, we're coming back to you with some proposed revisions to our initial proposed revisions. So the first one, we looked at wanting to eliminate the spoil pile. We feel that the existing ordinance has a provision that will adequately address that. It allows the spoil pile to remain up to 10 days, but the contractor has to have the right-of-way restoration done within 10 days of the completion of the excavation, so we think that's reasonable. We looked at adding language triggering the notification and signage requirements so that the installation or repair or replacement had to be over 400 feet. That way, if they're making a minor water repair or fixing an isolated gas leak, they do not have to put up the signage and do the notification. It would be only if they were doing utility work kind of on a block-by-block basis, which we think makes sense. I mean, that's what we were targeting when they're doing lots of utility installation in a particular area. For Section 3, which was the one dig policy, none of the utility companies are pretty excited about it, but we don't have any revisions that we suggest to that. We think the policy as originally proposed by legal is the best and should be adopted. For the fourth item on the city trees, and working with the utilities, we recognize that if they noticed us when they were working within the drip line of tree, that would be adequate. It's hard to know when you're going to be cutting a tree root 1 inch or more in diameter, so as long as they work with the city arborist anytime they're doing an open excavation within the drip line of a tree, we feel that'll be adequate to protect our city trees from utility damage. And then on the fifth item about the reduction in the time of the open excavations, the water company in particular had some concerns with their installations because of disinfection requirements and pressure testing requirements they have to do for the water main, that they asked for a a longer period for an open excavation to allow them to pass that testing before they have to backfill their pipes. And we did, after some consideration, think that was probably a reasonable request on their behalf. So we were going to provide a extension for potable water installation only up to 96 hours. The rest of the utilities would have the 48-hour rule applied unless the city engineer authorized an extension of that. So those are what we have. As we previously noted, there is no fiscal impact of this. This would be something the utility companies would be required to comply with, but it wouldn't have a cost impact on the city. So with that, I'll open up to any questions or concerns or comments.
Okay, well, thanks for the presentation. Are there comments or concerns? Mayor Pressing and then Aaron.
Is this something that all cities have to do? And I imagine, and are our requirements pretty much standard, state-of-the-art best practices?
That's an excellent point, Mayor. We actually adopted the new right-of-way ordinance in 2013, and we actually used the state model for it. We adopted at the same time in Champaign, and at the time we thought we had a pretty good ordinance based on the state model. But these are some, I would say, minor tweaks that we're making based on some experience with utility companies that we think will improve and make our ordinance better, and most importantly, protect residents from the potential of utility damages.
Thank you.
Aaron Neiman.
So I really like the fact that you worked with the other utility companies and the businesses, got their feedback, and seems to be a happy medium for the businesses as well as the residents. So I move to send this to council recommendation for approval.
Okay, Aaron Neiman moves it, seconded by Charlie Smythe. Is there other discussion? Yeah, Diane Marlin.
I just wanted to second what Aaron said. I appreciate the effort you made to respond to the residents' concerns, especially those along Florida Avenue, but along other places as well. So I think this is a good approach. Thanks.
Great. Any other comments? All right. And all those who approve?
Dennis,
Yes.
sorry, yeah. The whole concept of dig once, I think, is a real important one. A lot of communities are finding that to be important. We may have to, once we work with this a few times, I wouldn't be at all surprised if we have to tweak it yet again. So, it will be a good start, I hope. I know my constituents on Florida were pretty annoyed and dreading a fourth one, I think, maybe in the works.
Everything has its history, doesn't it? Okay. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. That's forwarded to council.
Thank you.
Next, we have ordinance number 2016-11-112, an ordinance approving a final subdivision plat, which is replat of lot 452 of Behringer Commons subdivision number 4. And this comes from planning case number 2292-S-16.
Greetings. So, as you'll
Kevin.
recall, this lot was subject of a major variance that was approved last week by the City Council, and a condition of that variance was that this final plat be approved by the City Council. Just as a little refresher, this lot is in Behringer Commons at the corner of East Behringer Circle and Rutherford Drive, and the lots would contain initially one model home and then to be followed by 11 townhouse units constructed next year. This lot was originally subject to a preliminary plat in 1991 that was revised and improved in 2001, and the proposed final replat is in substantial conformance with that preliminary plat from 2001, and it therefore goes directly to the City Council for approval. Last week we discussed the land use, zoning, and comprehensive plan designations, so I won't go through those again, except to say that the plat and the proposed use conforms with all of those. In the case of final plats, we look at things like access, drainage, utilities, etc. So just very briefly, access, as you'll recall, would be provided by individual driveways for each unit. The lots would drain to the detention basin on the west side to the back of the units, and then on the east side into existing storm sewers. The sidewalks at the site already exist in front of each lot, as do utilities. I did want to mention the plat was sent for comment to other utilities and also sent for internal review, and none of the utilities had any comment, or I suppose I should say their comment was no comment. The staff had some minor technical comments that the engineer will be addressing this week, and we'll make those changes prior to final recording of the document. And I also wanted to say that the petitioner is not requesting any waivers or deferrals from our subdivision and land development ordinance. So staff would recommend that the City Council ultimately approve this final plat, and that concludes my report, and I can take any questions.
So would you have any? Charlie Smythe.
Real quickly, Kevin, thank you. Very supportive of this project. Looking forward to seeing it done. I guess the one question last week came up, 3-car garages, that sort of thing. If Mr. Richardson finds that people want, 2-car garages or, slightly different, is he free to modify that? I mean, the driveway's sort of set, but...
Yeah, well, I mean, the plat, what you're approving now is just the replat, so that's just the layout of the lots. So the site, but he does have approval to make those wider driveways if he would like. He would be free to make narrower driveways. But the approval last week was so that he could put in driveways up to 27 feet wide.
I'm ready to send it on.
All right. Well, let's have Bill Brown.
Just looking at how tight the lots are and everything, is there any public access to that lake? I mean, not public, but neighborhood access to that lake, like running trails around it or anything like that?
There's not, but they are putting in an easement.
Wait.
Hold on.
Sure there is.
On Rutherford?
Around that lake?
Yeah, around that well. Yeah, I live on lot 449. There is around the complete south side of the lake is virtually the entire south side of the lake is. So are you talking about, so you mean just adjacent to here or public access to the lake, period?
Well, mostly I was just wondering if somebody was using it as a running trail, would they be able to get out? Is there is there an escape route out to Rutherford Drive through the? It looks like there's maybe 3 buildings or something with a lot of zero lot lines, and it just looks like there might be narrow access there. That's all.
There's a sidewalk that runs the length of from Behringer clear over to the west. There's a sidewalk that runs around the south side of the lake and exits prior to the condos on prior to the condos on Rutherford Drive. So between the last single-family home and the first condos on Rutherford. So you can get out there, and then the sidewalk wraps all the way around this development.
Okay, and then so those are wide enough for any kind of maintenance that would need to be done to that detention pond too?
Yeah, and there are easements back there. Yeah. There's an existing easement back there, and there's also going to be a commons area that's dedicated so that the residents of all these units sort of have a shared access to the lake.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for staff? Charlie Smythe.
Move to send to council recommendation for approval.
Second.
Okay. Moved by Charlie Smythe, seconded by Mike Madigan. Other comments or questions at this time? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of sending this forward to City Council with approval indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, that goes forward.
Thank you.
We have one more item.
No-brainer.
Good, Matt. Hi. This is going to be resolution number 2016-11-068R. a resolution assigning an Urbana Home Consortium tenant-based rental assistance program agreement with community elements, concerning community elements for the year 2013 through 14. That's old business. Go ahead, though, and tell us why we're doing it.
Yes, thank you. In 2014, the City of Urbana executed a tenant-based rental assistance agreement with community elements using our allocation of federal home funds. And as many of you know, earlier this year, Community Elements merged with the existing Rosecrans Incorporated. But in order to then use the funding that we originally execute from this agreement that we originally executed in 2014, we need to execute an assignment of this from Community Elements to Rosecrans so that they're able to continue funding their tenant-based rental assistance program. In talking with Rosecrans' staff, they're currently operating their program out of a previously assigned tenant-based rental assistance agreement, but in order to pay reimbursement for their December rental assistance payments, we will need to assign this agreement to them. So with that in mind, and knowing that tenant-based rental assistance is a very important need in the community, and it's a very important part of our 2015-2019 consolidated plan, specifically with regards to alleviating the shortage of affordable housing in Champaign County. This agreement, one reimbursement from this agreement was made in 2014, such that there's currently about $28,000 remaining on this contract. Rosecrans has until June 30th of 2017 to expend this contract, and because this funding was already committed in 2014, it will not impact our current commitments, our progress toward meeting our commitment deadline in 2017. Effectively, we're just allowing Rosecrans to use this funding. With that in mind, staff recommends that the Committee of the Whole move this to City Council with recommendation for approval.
Are there questions? Yes, Diane.
Well, given the great need in this community, why hasn't Community Elements spent this grant money before now, if they're still working on fiscal year 12-13?
That's simply the time period. This is actually the most recent, this 13-14 agreement is the most recent agreement that we've executed with Community Elements. They've simply had a backlog since this time. We believe they've had some staffing issues. They've kept their tenant-based rental assistance roster relatively low. But we are going to meet with them actually this week as part of a monitoring visit to try to talk with them and take a look at their tenant-based rental assistance
So they've
program.
had this, I mean, they've got $27,000, they're sitting on $28,000. They've had it for over 2 years, as I understand, if I'm reading this.
Yes.
So who qualifies for this assistance?
It's people who meet the, at most 80% of the median family income for Champaign County, and also meeting some of Rosecrans's, their organizational requirements as well. I'm not sure exactly what those are. If you're interested, I could forward.
Yeah, I'd like to know.
Okay.
I mean, we're all aware of the need, and so I'm just shocked that this money is just not being used for what it was intended for after this long a time. So I'd be curious to know what their criteria are.
Yes, and I can pass
and
that
how
along.
how one applies for it, or I don't even know that.
Yeah,
so.
because this is home funding, they have 5 years to expend it. But I understand, yes, there's definitely an important need, and it's very rare that we get to, or that any contracts reach that anywhere close to that 5-year maximum time limit for home funding.
All right, then, Erica.
So I wonder if they would be willing to come and speak with us about their practices and their plans.
We could definitely, yes, we can reach out to them and ask if they'd be willing to come to the council meeting and address some of those concerns.
Bill Brown.
Yeah, thanks for sending me the information earlier that I asked about and explain how the continuum of care works, and that they'll be meeting in December, and that's where you kind of coordinate all the homeless options. I was curious about this TBRA compared to the TBRA we do through Regional Planning Commission. That's a completely separate program, right?
It's a completely separate program, but also funded out of the home funding.
And so I think through the RPC they have kind of a moving to work requirement, and I wonder, is this one more flexible and meant to be able to maybe be used in more urgent circumstances?
It's really, as long as their program is within the federal regulations, they're really allowed to put whatever restrictions and preferences that they have or that they would like onto the program. And I can send out those details of what those are and the details about their rental assistance program if you like. At this time I can't speak as to what the differences are between Rosecrance's program and regional planning commissions.
Okay. And then I know a lot of people are concerned because of the Times Center shutting down part of their operation. Would this be the type of funding that could make up for some of the people that used to take advantage of the Times Center?
It's possible. You mentioned the continuum of care. There's always a continuum of people trying to get them from the street or whatever precarious housing position they might be in to emergency shelters and then transitioning them eventually into permanent housing. And tenant-based rental assistance can act as an important bridge to getting people to independence and staying in permanent housing on their own self-sufficient means. So in that sense, yes, TBRA could act as a very important bridge in that regard.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Eric Jacobson.
So I'm puzzled about something. I mean, you work for the city, but we are on both the township board and the city council. And we discussed and approved an arrangement whereby the township supervisor would provide rental assistance. And now that's been discontinued because those funds were not expended. So there seems to be a really serious mismatch between our desire, our willingness to support meeting this need, and what is actually happening. So, you know, I think everybody on the council is totally supportive of meeting this need, but we really have to figure out with the people who are actually implementing this, you know, what is the best way to do it.
Charlie?
Yeah, it seems that RPC doesn't seem to have any problem distributing their money and finding, you know, needy, those in need of that help. So I think a comparison of programs is probably in order, and which leads me to the question here. Suppose we don't approve this, what happens then? You know, what's the scenario? Can we reallocate that money to some other program?
If effectively, Rosecrance has their agreement right now, and they are on lease with clients. And if we were not able to provide them reimbursement for their December rental agreement, the city would still be on the hook for them. We have already executed our agreement saying that we would reimburse those rental assistance payments, but if we don't use the home funds to do that, at that point I can't really speak to the specifics of what would happen. I'm not sure also if this money can be reallocated that would likely have to be done with mutual agreement with Rosecrans because we have executed this agreement with them. We're sort of in a murky area because the agreement is currently with Community Elements. And Community Elements may currently still exist in some way, but that could be something to take up as a legal question. I'm not sure that I can answer that right now.
And I think Pressing has
Yeah.
comments here.
This is a casualty of not having a state budget. That's why Community Elements went belly up. And Rosecrans was a more viable, bigger organization. So they're asking for this money so that they can spend it. And they're capable of spending it. But why couldn't Community Elements do it? Because they couldn't even pay their staff. They had to let people go.
This money is specifically geared towards rental assistance. It could not be used for administrative funding at all.
Right, but if you don't have somebody to administer it, you couldn't give the money to
Exactly.
Okay, that's a pretty interesting answer. All right, so is there any proposal or whatever? Charlie Smythe.
Move to send this to council.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Aaron Hammonds. Other discussion about this item? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? That passes and goes to council. That's the last piece of business. If there's no other input, we are adjourned.